Hello, and welcome to the Europe at War podcast.
Hello there. We've just kicked off a new series telling the story of the Battle of Berlin. So I thought it would be the perfect time to sit down with Peter Graham from the excellent Berlin Battle Damage Facebook page. Peter, like me, is fascinated with the Battle of Berlin. And in 2018, he launched the Berlin Battle Damage page in order to document the bullet holes and shrapnel damage still visible across the city, all of which serve as a testament to the fighting which ravaged Berlin in April and May 1945. Peter and I both believe that in order to understand modern-day Berlin, you have to appreciate what the city went through along the way. Therefore, preserving the physical signs of the Battle of Berlin is an important step to teaching future generations about the struggles Berlin and Berliners went through in order to create the modern city we have today. But as Peter and I discuss in the interview, some examples of battle damage in Berlin have been patched up or covered up in recent years, which is perhaps a sign that whilst Berlin is a city shaped by its history, it is also a city which is keen to reinvent itself as it looks to the future. In any case, as what inevitably happens when two Second World War enthusiasts get chatting, we went off topic at times, discussing everything from the politics of Soviet war photography to my surprise discovery of an air raid shelter ventilation shaft on a street corner near my house. So it goes. Next week we will continue with our series on the Battle of Berlin. But in the meantime, please enjoy my chat with Peter. See you next week. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the Europe at War podcast. Today, we're going to be talking all things Berlin and maybe all things Battle of Berlin. And for that, I think you are the expert and the right guy to talk to. But before we get into our questions, please feel free to introduce yourself to my listeners. Who are you? Where are you from? And perhaps where did your interest in the Second World War begin?
Hi, David. Thanks very much for having me on the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure. I was brought up in Belfast in Northern Ireland, born in the mid-60s and brought up in the 70s and 80s. And kids brought up in the 70s in Britain were just inundated with World War II films, comics, and it was part of the culture back then, and especially for a kid of my age, it seemed a natural thing, and I was always interested in it, especially from my own father's experiences of the Luftwaffe's blitz on Belfast.
Oh, wow.
Easter 1940 and 1941. So he told me stories of pulling people out of the rubble and seeing the Hankels up above and the searchlights, and it was obviously fascinating me. It brought it a bit more to life, and yeah, I mean, he had some great stories that I'll tell you sometime. One amazing story was there weren't at the time, Belfast didn't have a lot of anti-aircraft defences or air raid shelters because nobody thought that the Germans could reach Belfast right across England. And this was completely untrue, as I discovered in April 1940. And there was a serviceman home on leave, and his family were having a bit of a party for him across the street from my dad's house. And a German parachute mine dropped on the neighbour's house across the street, and the whole family were killed, apart from one baby that my father helped to drag from the rubble afterwards. My dad was 10 at the time. He was born 1931. So this was, yeah, nine, sorry, he was nine at the time. And he helped to pull the baby from the rubble. And as the decades went by, he moved to completely the other side of Belfast. And sometime in the 1980s, he was out for a walk and down the street, and there was a woman who was tending her garden, and he stopped and they started chatting. And it turned out that woman was the baby that he helped to pull from the
Oh,
rubble
wow.
in
Wow.
1940.
Wow.
A mad coincidence. But
Wow.
yeah, absolutely, it's a great one. Also, his uncle Sid was a career soldier.
Yeah.
He's he served in India before the war, and then he was in tanks in Italy. Volunteered for the parachute regiment in 1943, and he dropped into Arnhem,
Oh, wow.
Operation Market Garden, and but he didn't make it. He was killed by a German sniper
Oh,
right by St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Arnhem
oh,
on the 18th of September 1944, and he was 38 years old. He must have been one of the oldest guys in the airborne, but
exactly.
he didn't make it. I visited his grave about 5 years ago in Oosterbeek, just outside Arnhem. So yeah, so that's how my whole interest in World War II developed.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, those are some incredible kind of personal connections, or let's say, familial connections there. I think when you talk about, in the UK, we grew up with the Second World War in the sense that people are happy to talk about it.
yeah,
They are happy to share family stories, family histories, and then you move to Germany, where I've lived in Berlin for more than 15 years, and I guess you've had the same experience. Germans are not excitedly sharing war stories, of course, because they have a very
no,
different.
absolutely not.
And
No,
does that maybe then bleed into moving on to kind of the Berlin battle damage topic, where you have put like many years of effort now going through Berlin and categorizing what you can see in terms of damage? And does that resonate with you? Is your audience therefore mainly British who wants to see those things, or do you also see Germans who are interested in that?
I have a wide variety of people who come on the tours. British, Americans, South Americans, from all over Europe, but and also Germans on the tours. It's always nice to have native Berliners on the tours. I always have a few
Yeah,
because inevitably they'll tell me a story or two about their own family, and
right.
I think pretty much all of them have a story to tell about a relative who maybe was in the Hitler Youth or Volkssturm or the Wehrmacht. They all, and I think they maybe don't feel comfortable talking about these things, maybe with other Germans. I'm
Mm,
not sure. But with me, they'll sort of open up a bit. On the last tour, I had a lady along, a Berliner, whose father fought on the Silo Heights.
oh, wow.
And yeah, and she was telling me some stories about that. She's gonna send me some photographs, from his Wehrmacht photograph album. So that should be interesting.
That's really interesting. That's a rare find.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I just had a Canadian lady contact me yesterday, who's hopefully I'll meet up with in June. She's coming to Berlin for the very first time in her life in June to trace her family's history because her father uh, lived through the Battle of Berlin. I think he was about 10 years old at the time, and he emigrated to Canada in 1953 by himself. Um, but his brother, who was 15 in 1945, was forced into the Hitler Youth and was forced to fight in the Battle of Berlin and perished in the battle and
Oh,
has no known grave. And this lady has come to Berlin to just try to piece together her father's history.
of,
So
of course.
hopefully I'll meet up with her in June. It should be interesting.
Absolutely. So is it the desire to kind of, link up the personal stories of the people behind the battle and then the battle damage that you can still see around Berlin? Was that one of the kind of main inspirations for you to then start the Berlin Battle Damage Facebook page, where trying to say, look, it's not just about the bullet tracer holes or whatever, that there are stories behind it as well? Or what were your general inspirations for starting the Facebook page?
Initially, actually, it was Anthony Beevor's book on the Battle of Berlin. I'm a relative newcomer to Berlin. The first I didn't visit Berlin for the first time till 2012. Okay, I think I read Beaver's book maybe 2010 or something. Whenever it was published, first published anyway. I'm not sure exactly when. But
Yeah.
there was a documentary on, and I think it was on BBC, where Beaver went to Berlin to do some research for the book, and he was I think he was at the time he was accompanied by one of the guides from the Berliner Unterwelten, and they were in a courtyard which was plastered in battle damage. And the guy from the Unterwelten said, "This is one of the last traces of the Battle of Berlin." And I watched. I thought to myself,
Mhm.
"That's pretty sad." And then in 2012, when I first visited, that was on a family holiday. I immediately started seeing this stuff everywhere, and I was thinking, whoa, what were those guys talking about there?" You know, um, from the very first visit, I started photographing this stuff, and went back very regularly after that. And I started amassing all these photographs of the battle damage of Berlin. And I thought, I'd love to find out some of the personal stories behind this stuff. So I thought, yeah, I've got all these photographs. I'm doing a bit of research here. What am I going to do with it? So I just thought, right, I'll open up this Facebook page, and hopefully there might be a few people interested in it. And that was really the inspiration behind it. It was just to let other people see what is still there to be found in Berlin if you walk the streets, and the evidence still of the battle,
Absolutely.
and the stories behind the damage. It's important to it's important to unearth some of the personal things behind what you can see. I mean, each bullet hole could potentially, tells a story, which
Absolutely.
a lot are lost to time. Obviously, it's hard to tell exactly what happened at each location, but you know, we can have a fair stab at it with
You
the, with
absolutely can.
with research. Yeah,
Yeah, you absolutely can. You mentioned that, if you walk around Berlin, you can still find these things. You can even find the attempts by building owners to then cover it up. I was walking around Friedrichstraße last week, and there's a restaurant right alongside the river, close to the footbridge that leads under the Friedrichstraße kind of train tracks. And on
sure.
restaurant on the corner, the name escapes me right now. But you can see that there clearly were bullet holes there, which have now had their polyfiller, like poured in, and it's now been paved over, and it looks like the building's got, like spots on it. It looks very, very strange, but you can clearly tell that's an attempt by the building owner to then just cover it up. But
Yeah,
it's there. If you know the story behind it, then you can still see that trace, even if it has been slightly, amended.
yeah. It's a thing. I think once your eyes get tuned into it, then you see it everywhere on buildings of that era, obviously. And there's not too many buildings that escaped unscathed.
No.
So you're going to find stuff on a lot of the buildings. I mean, yeah, you know yourself, a lot of them have been completely replastered
Mm,
and look like, that nothing had ever happened to them. But especially the traces on brickwork and
mm,
metalwork are a lot harder to cover up than on plaster facades. And it's a lot easier to trace what happened on those sort of buildings for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. You've mentioned your Facebook community, and I would say that when I look at that Facebook page, it seems you have a really, really engaged Facebook community. People are very happy for what that you share with them. They're leaving comments. They're asking you to maybe give them, precise locations where they can go find it for themselves. Are you really surprised by the interest and the fascination out there amongst people for the still lingering signs of Berlin's battle damage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started, I thought, well, maybe maybe get a few hundred like-minded individuals. I mean, I wouldn't. I think we have about 15,000 followers now.
Wow.
Um, and I wouldn't say it wasn't an overnight success or anything like that. It sort of gradually built up. I think I started it in 2017 or 18, round about then. And the past year or so, it's really taken off, especially since I started doing the walk-in tours in 2023,
Right.
which seemed like a natural progression from the page. Do you know what I mean? To make it three-dimensional rather than two-dimensional. I first put the idea out there just before COVID. I think I put a post up and asked if anyone would be interested in accompanying me on a walk around Berlin to
Right.
see some of the battle damage. And I got a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback from that. Um, and then COVID happened, and obviously, nothing like that was possible for that period. And then after everything calmed down, then I think I didn't do anything maybe for another year or so, and then put a similar sort of post out. Started 2023. Anybody interested? And yeah, got loads of people interested, and put the first tour together in Schöneberg, which is my own area. So
Right.
it's an area I know well and I'm comfortable in. So I thought, well, and there's a lot of great World War II stories connected to Schöneberg and the Soviet progress through Schöneberg, the assault over the Landwehr Canal. So I ran the first tour then, and yeah, it just took off from there. People really enjoyed it.
Well, that's fantastic. Do you
Yeah,
find?
and well, it surprised me. It did surprise me, and it still does. And there's a lot of followers on the page from the United States, Canada, Asia, India, and a lot of those people will probably never be able to visit Berlin. So that I like to sort of bring the history of the city to life a bit for them. I mean, it's like myself, right? I'll probably never be able to visit the battlefield stuff of the Pacific, like Peleliu or Iwo Jima. But
Yeah,
I still love to see the photographs of what those battlefields look like today. It just
absolutely.
fascinates me. But
Absolutely.
there's a remote chance I'll ever get there. So I imagine it's the same for those people looking at the evidence of the Battle of Berlin, because after all, I mean, it was one of the pivotal moments of the 20th century, one of the pivotal events of the 20th century, and which sort of shaped the shape of Europe
Mm.
afterwards.
I wonder also as well if people in, so let's say the Battle of Berlin in the popular mindset for many years was just the storming of the Reichstag. That's what most people knew about, and the whole, repeated efforts to put the red flag on top of the building. But actually,
Yeah,
the Battle of Berlin was far more complex than that. It lasted for at least 2 weeks, if you count the Zelo Heights as well as the kind of start of the battle, and that pretty much every district of Berlin saw fighting. It wasn't just, the inner, Citadella district. It was all of the defense sectors all around Berlin were involved in the battle. And then you have Konyev's front from the south and Zhukov's front from the east. It is actually a very, very complex and fascinating battle in and of itself. And I wonder if people are now more interested in learning more about the battle beyond just what they commonly knew with the Reichstag and the most, the most famous parts of it, such as the breakout groups.
yeah, for sure. And that's what I want to sort of bring to life a
Yeah.
bit for people. It's still an ongoing project for me. what I'd like to do ultimately is have an individual tour for each defense sector
Oh, wow.
plus Citadel.
Okay.
So what's that?
So A to H
A
plus.
to H.
Yeah.
At the minute, I don't work very quickly. I've got four individual tours. It takes months to research a tour, months, and to research it, find the photographs. So yeah, I've got four, and then there's all sorts of individual actions as well in those defence sectors, such as the Nordland and the Charlemagne in Neukölln,
Mm.
and as you mentioned, the breakout attempts on Friedrichstrasse and
Mm.
Schönhauser Allee, and
Mm.
then across the Charlottenbrücke, the Spandau, the, all sorts of individual stories
Yeah. Maybe
in
one.
those sectors.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. Maybe
I
one
just
could
say
be.
it's really it's a complex battle. It really
Yeah.
is. Especially when you look at how many individuals Soviet units took part. It's mind-boggling, as I'm sure you know. Um, and then, of course, the whole mix-up of the German units and regiments and Volkssturm and Hitler. And, it is a complex battle, and it takes a long time to get your head around it.
Yeah, it's a very complex battle, but as you said, a very important battle. I mean, Berlin is a city that's been at the center of many different historical events over the years. And of course, that's one of the things that drew me to this city when I moved over here all those years ago. And obviously it draws yourself to the city. You keep coming back here as well. And there's an incredible, I think, thirst for or interest for Berlin's past, given that Berlin is a constantly changing city. I mean, it's like a building site, you could call
It
it.
is.
It's always been. You've got new buildings coming up every day. Old historical buildings are perhaps being, their facades are being torn down and they're being modernized. What are your views on the perhaps controversial nature of should Second World War damage be maintained, or do you think it's fair for a city to want to change and then maybe turn over a new page in their book and turn over a leaf and move on into the future? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, not surprisingly, given the nature of my interest, I personally think that the history of the city, including the battle damage, should be preserved as much as possible.
Mm.
But I mean, you got to be realistic about this. I mean, I understand that a lot of people consider it unsightly, and it sometimes it could be impractical to preserve it, such as shell holes and bullet holes maybe would allow water ingress into the walls of buildings and affect the structural integrity of a building. And it is damage. And the nature of damage is that it has to be repaired at some point. I think
But
that the departments, the government departments of Berlin, I think, are quite at odds with each other as far as the official line on preserving it. It's quite confusing. You'll see a government building, and there's a great one on Schwester Schollstrasse, number 5. I believe it's the former Prussian government minister's residence, and it's got plastered in battle damage, absolutely dramatic, and it hasn't been touched at all. Even the pavement in front of it is pockmarked, completely covered. But there's a little plaque on the building to explain what the damage was and how it was caused, and to say that it is being preserved. Whereas, for instance, there's an S-Bahn bridge on the Reinhardtstrasse,
mm-hmm.
and for years, on the brick facade below the bridge, there was a lot of very dramatic looking battle damage. I think maybe from aerial bombs, but I'm not absolutely sure.
Right.
And so I actually posted some photographs of it on the page, and then somebody contacted me maybe a year later and said that's all gone now. So I went to see for myself, and yeah, the brick facade had been completely removed and replaced with just brand new bricks. Now
Wow.
it was only a facade, so it didn't affect the structural integrity of that bridge whatsoever because it's an iron bridge.
Yeah.
Um, it was just because somebody in a government department decided that that looked a bit scruffy, and I think it's a shame that yeah, that stuff like that's being covered over. It's probably being covered over faster than I can photograph it. As we speak, there's probably battle damage being covered somewhere in Berlin.
Yeah,
Um, so it's like a race against time to document this stuff
it is.
before it goes. It's not all going to go because, as I mentioned, for instance, the one on Geschwester Schollstrasse, that building,
Mm.
that somebody has decided that they're going to keep that, and I
Yeah.
don't know why they decide to keep some and not others. And it's yeah, I think it's just different government departments at odds with each other, which is the same as government departments anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Especially German
uh,
bureaucratic, governmental departments are a breed unto their own.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there's a great example of private property, people making the right decision, as far as I'm concerned,
Mm.
on Gross Hamburger Strasse. I think it was last October, maybe the October before. I took a tour group down Sophienstrasse, and we cut through from the Sophienskirche to Gross Hamburger Strasse, and there's a building there. You're bound to know it, and the whole side of it is covered in small arms damage. And that time in October when we cut through, the whole building was covered in scaffold, and they were actually plastering over the bullet holes while I was pointing them out. And I thought, all right, okay, this is the last time I'm going to be able to show people
Yeah.
this damage. What a shame. But it transpired that I went back a while later and the scaffolding was gone. Some of the bullet holes, the lower ones, had been plastered over, but they'd left most of them.
Oh,
And the
that's good.
scaffolding,
Yeah.
it had all been removed. So they had made a conscious decision. And this is a private building.
Right.
There's a shop at the front, and I think maybe the side of apartments. They'd covered over some of this damage because maybe it was the water was getting in through the holes and maybe affecting the lower floors. But 90% of that damage is still there, and they've made a conscious decision
Right.
to leave it. And it was good to see, definitely, and then, so I think there's also elements that maybe elements in the government that would like to see all of Berlin looking like Potsdamer Platz does now.
I can believe what you mean with that. It's a big shame. You can also maybe go down to the micro level, and if you have a group of builders and they're given a job such as put the scaffolding up, unless there's a historical expert with them, kind of guiding them through the process, they won't maybe typically understand exactly the historical importance of what they're being told to work on. And so it does need the right guidance and the right oversight if you want to keep these things and maintain. I, like you, I'm a strong supporter in keeping these, battle scars, because Berlin's history, maybe more than most cities, has been shaped by a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And you cannot understand modern Berlin without understanding and actually maybe even seeing the blood, sweat, and tears that it took to get where we are now here today. And part of the story is the Battle of Berlin. And it's a very important story. And I really, really hope they keep as much evidence and scars of that as possible.
Yeah, completely agree 100%.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people say that if you cover the past, then you're condemned to repeat it.
I can,
So,
yeah. Yeah, 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 absolutely. You mentioned, you mentioned maybe people want it to look like Potsdamer Platz. I wonder if they wish it would look like Potsdam, so the city of Potsdam outside of Berlin. I mean, I lived there for a couple of years, and that looks. I see old pictures of Potsdam just from the early 90s or even the 80s and 70s within DDR times, and Potsdam has changed so much, and pretty much all of the facades of the buildings in the center of Potsdam have been touched up, but to make it look as if it was an old, Prussian grandeur. I found there is one house, I think, on Berliner Straße coming out of Potsdam where you can see some battle damage. Um,
I know the house. Yeah,
yeah,
I know it.
but that is very, very rare. And even in that area close to Klinika Brücke, it's mainly very, very nice villas and very posh apartment blocks. It just, yeah, it's very, very hard to find any evidence of the previous battle. It's really, really, really quite sad if you think about it. But it makes it,
It- it-
yeah, it makes it even more important efforts like yours to try and document these things while they are still there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with you about Potsdam. Potsdam's pretty, but it's a bit bland. Everything's just a bit whitewashed looking or something, you know. Um, the history has been sort of sanitized to a certain degree in Potsdam. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Is it?
agree with you there.
I'm a big fan of Potsdam. I studied there. I did my master's degree there at the university. But there's lots about Potsdam that is not advertised. Maybe because they have the Stasi prison in the middle of Potsdam as well,
Oh,
which
really? I didn't know that.
it's a remand prison. So it wasn't a prison, but like a remand prison while they were kind of held on remand whilst maybe they were going to trial. And it's just in the middle of Potsdam, right off Brandenburger Straße, the main shopping street in the middle of Potsdam. And
Sure, yeah.
it's not advertised in a large way. There is a white line on the floor which you can follow, which leads you to the front door of this place. And downstairs, there's the courtroom, which was used in Nazi times, particularly for passing judgment on, I believe, condemning people to euthanasia policies. So, like the programs to, condemn mentally and physically handicapped people,
Sure, yeah.
but behind that and above it is actually it was turned into a Stasi remand prison after the war in DDR times and it then served that purpose for a number of decades. And that's right in the middle of Potsdam. And you would walk past it and not even know. So yeah, I do agree with you that Potsdam has sanitized many parts of its history, but yeah, that's part of maybe the German, approach to history where a lot of it is bloody awful. So maybe they're just trying not to, dwell on
Yeah.
all of it. But it's also understandable maybe in some way.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You've obviously walked all over Berlin. I imagine you've seen every corner of the city in your travels for battle damage. What's the most interesting or unexpected battle damage site in Berlin which you have come across?
I haven't walked every street in Berlin just yet. I think it'll take me a few more
There's
years to
still
do
time.
that. There's still time, yeah. And one of the most interesting sights I found was an S-Bahn bridge just off Kantstraße, near Savignyplatz
Mhm.
on Liebnisstraße. And it's an iron bridge dating probably
Mhm.
from the late 1890s, early 1900s. And something serious went on there underneath that bridge. But the most fascinating thing about it is on one of the bridge supports, there is a hole made by a Soviet 85 millimeter armor piercing round. I know it's 85 millimeter because I took a tape measure and measured the diameter. And it went through maybe 6 inches of solid
Wow.
crop steel. And if you look through that hole, you can see the rifling where this
Oh,
shell
wow.
was spinning as it went through that bridge support like a knife through butter,
It's
and
incredible.
then ricocheted off the bridge support behind it. You can see where it ricocheted, and then just went off right into the wall, into the brick wall, and you can see on the brick wall the big chunks out of that wall. So you can follow the
Wow.
trajectory of that 85 millimeter round from a T-34 85 or maybe an Su-85 assault gun must have fired down there from Kantstrasse. And the fact that they used an armor piercing round would suggest that maybe there was some German armor underneath that bridge at the time.
Right. Right.
Because not only that hole, but as I said, each side of the road, every bridge support is just plastered in heavy machine gun fire, shell fire, and it's spectacular. So yeah, that's probably the most interesting. I know it's just part of one small action.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just like a little snapshot of history.
Yeah.
You know exactly what weapon caused that, which is quite rare to know exactly what weapon caused the damage. Um, Yorkstrasse, again, iron bridge supports. There's many bridges across Yorkstrasse at the time, running from Anhalter Bahnhof and the Anhalter railway yards. And there's one bridge support on Yorkstrasse where what looks like an aerial bomb or a artillery shell, a heavy artillery shell, has landed right beside the bridge support, and you can see that the bridge support has been maybe again 6 inches of steel has actually been bent like a banana
Wow.
inwards, and lots of pock marks on the walls. Um, York Strasse is fascinating. People don't really take a lot of notice of York Strasse because it's a bit scruffy.
Yeah, it's
You know,
not
it's not.
it's not on the main, tourist route, is it?
No, for sure it's not. Um, but York Strasse is fascinating. There's so much damage on York Strasse of the bridges. If you look closely, you can see all sorts of shrapnel holes and shell holes along there. Um,
Right.
because that was the Soviets came along short. That was one of the routes that they used to come in from that direction, from the southeast along York Strasse, and there's a lot of evidence of that. And even on even some of the bridges, the disused bridges on York Strasse, there are white boxes with with a grid pattern on the white boxes with the information about when the bridge was last maintained and last painted and what firm painted the bridge. And the earliest one I can find, which is still there, is 1937. And the last time the bridge was painted, and it said what firm painted the bridge and the date in 1937. If you look along those bridges, you can see all the inscriptions to say when the bridges were maintained. 1942 is on one of them as well. So York Strasse is a fascinating place to me, anyway. Um,
It's like a time capsule then, isn't it?
it is absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, again, modernization's happening on York Strasse. Even since I've been going down there, I think two or three of those bridges have been removed, just lifted and taken away. Iron bridges. And again, another interesting thing about York Strasse is a lot of the bridge supports, the iron bridge supports, which were beautiful, actually, beautifully ornate. Uh, about the bottom 5 feet of them are actually encased in huge concrete blocks,
Right.
and people wouldn't notice those concrete blocks, or if they would, they just wouldn't take just
Yeah.
what are those for, But they were actually placed there in World War II because,
Oh, really?
yeah, because the bridges themselves rest on those iron bridge supports. They're not actually attached to them. It's just gravity holding those bridge supports up.
Right.
And they weighed them down with these huge concrete blocks so that when if a bomb fell, the blast wave wouldn't lift the bridge off the bridge support and allow the bridge support to just crash down onto the road.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so a lot of those bridge supports on York Strasse with the concrete blocks around them were actually placed there. I think it was 1941 they were placed there, and they're still there.
Yeah, so but that's also just to maybe make the point that it's not just battle damage that we're looking for or that you're trying to show to your tour guests. It's it's traces of the past which can still be found, which have their own reasoning and function. Once you know what they were used for, then you can say it is not just a piece of concrete that you would have walked past and not thought twice about. It actually served a very specific function back in its day during the war. And then you're also teaching that part of history, which people just are not aware of.
Yeah, most people would completely ignore that stuff,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's ugly. It's not attractive. It's not nice to look at, and nobody walks along York Strasse to admire the architecture.
No, no.
Most people are cycling along there, like cycling to work, cycling home from work. They don't stop to look, and which is nice. It's nice to take a group of people there and to just s- take our time and
Absolutely, yeah. As I
explain
said,
to them.
yeah, I mean, you actually you inspired me slightly. I was looking at your Facebook page and I saw that a couple of years ago you posted a picture of a Mannesmann Luftschutzbunker, like kind of the outer kind of steel grid plating that you can see at street level. I guess it would have been probably for an air duct into a bunker under the street level. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I was walking around my area. I live up here in Reading, and there is a GSG building, which used to be a former AEG factory works up near Oslo Strasse. And I've walked past that building probably every day for the past 5 years, at least, maybe longer, right? And then I look down, and they've got these Mannesmann Luftschutzbunker steel plates on top.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
ventilation
exactly.
cover,
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just there, and people are walking over them every single day, and it doesn't have a plaque explaining what this was or why it was there. But if you know the history, then suddenly a banal piece of pavement actually can come to life. And there's a really, really interesting, fascinating story about it. There was a large bunker under that factory for all the AEG workers during the war, and there are still traces of that to be found.
Yeah, yeah, and that bunker's probably still there underneath it,
Yeah,
used
probably
as
because they
used
built the
to
bunkers pretty well.
yeah, it's probably used as storage now. Yeah, that reminds me of there's a factory courtyard just near Hassenheide, near Hermannplatz,
Right.
and it still has an Einmann bunker in the factory courtyard. Yeah, an Einmann bunker. Yeah,
It looks like a missile, but it's not. It's like the top half is like a cone shaped.
yeah, it
Yeah.
used to shelter one man,
Right.
who was basically he would have been a fire watcher, keeping a lookout for incendiary bombs dropping. So the Iron Man bunker they sheltered the fire watcher to keep an eye on what was happening during the raids. But the Iron Man bunker is still there in the factory courtyard, and
Oh,
there's
wow.
actually also there's a just near the bunker there's a fluorescent arrow which just looks like a fluorescent arrow unless you know what it means, and that was the arrow pointing towards the Luftschutzkeller.
At
The
night, you would need a fluorescent arrow to then tell people in darkness where to go.
mm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You follow that arrow, which is still there on the wall, faded, and just round the corner from that, you'll see there's a set of stairs going down below the courtyard, and those little things are still there, and they're fascinating.
Yeah. Did you get in there?
No, no, it's still a functioning factory.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's not open. There's a door at the bottom of it. Fortunately,
Mm.
uh, Berlin's full of bunkers. There's so much underground that people don't know are there, and above ground, the Hoch bunkers. There's quite a few around if you sort of do a bit of research and walk the streets, you'll find them especially around Tempelhof. There's still a lot of high bunkers,
Mm.
still around Tempelhof to be discovered. Um, I actually found my way into one a few years ago.
How did you
The
do
door,
that?
the door was wide open, and so I sort of tiptoed in and had a look around and tiptoed upstairs, and it was all original inside. It's all the signage. Rauchen verboten and Ausgang and all, in that script and that's really recognizable
Yeah, the
World
Gothic
War
script.
II German
Yeah.
official script. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then I sort of freaked out a bit because I thought, that maybe somebody will slam the door behind me and I'll I'll be trapped inside the bunker. But I discovered later it was actually it's being used as a rehearsal rooms for bands and
Oh,
musicians. So that's why the door was open. Each of the rooms were being used by people. So it's still functioning, still yeah, a
yeah.
functioning building just been put to another use.
Very, very
Uh,
good acoustics. Yeah, there we are. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
fun. Berlin has changed so much since 1945. We talked briefly about, East Berlin, West Berlin. That obviously had a huge impact on how the architecture of the areas have changed so much since the Second World War. But if you're on a tour and you're trying to tell a story about a certain action that took place, um, and the buildings look completely different to how they used to look, how are you bringing that story to life? You are using photos, or are you using kind of other methods to kind of tell your tour group or paint them a picture so they can understand what happened?
Yeah, photos are absolutely essential in what I do. For sure, yeah. I'll paint a picture to start off with, and give a lot of background information on the subject of the tour, or the action that took place. I mean, the Friedrichstrasse breakout, for instance. I mean, as you know yourself, Friedrichstrasse looks very, very different now than it did in
Mm.
1945. But the important thing is there's enough original buildings there to allow people to imagine what it looked like.
Mm.
So I'll show the group photographs from where
Yeah.
this was taken in 1945, and you say, right, that building in the background there, you can see that that's the original building still in place.
Right.
Um, and Friedrichstrasse, particularly in the aftermath of the breakout, we're fortunate enough to have a lot of evidence so that the Soviets must have had a lot of official photographers in that area, in the hours and days after the breakout attempt. And obviously the breakout attempt was the 2nd of May, and
Mm.
the same day as the German surrender, when they laid down their arms after Weidling's declaration of surrender. So the Soviets must have had a lot of photographers in the Times, on Friedrichstrasse at the time. So we're fortunate enough to be able to see photographs of lines of German prisoners being marched up Friedrichstrasse, and the aftermath of the breakout with the half tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the absolute utter devastation of Friedrichstrasse, and I did the photographs just bring that to life, because it's hard for somebody to imagine what Friedrichstrasse looked like in May 1945 compared to what it looks like now. But yeah, the the tool I use is the photographs, and comparing the architecture. I talk a lot about the architecture of Berlin on my tours,
Mm.
and to show how not only the Battle of Berlin but World War II in its
Mm.
entirety shaped how the modern city looks now. The gaps in buildings, and like
Yeah.
pull teeth. You know that's a bomb
Yeah.
site, right? But maybe somebody doesn't know it's a bomb site until it's pointed out to them that that's a bomb site. It's not an obvious thing, but if you know the history of the city, then you can say, yeah, yeah, that's a bomb site, or a building that was so badly damaged during the battle that it had to be completely taken down. So
Exactly.
yeah, photographs are really important on the tours, and it takes a lot of research to maybe get the photographs I need to bring the story to life. I'd love to do a tour in Charlottenburg, including Kantstrasse, and as I previously mentioned, that S-Bahn bridge, with all the serious damage, because Kantstrasse was quite important. That was the breakout attempt, through Spandau, started off at the zoo bunker, the zoo
Yeah.
flak term, and they progressed up Kantstrasse. But the problem is that the Soviets didn't appear to have had photographers in that area,
Right.
because there were very, very few photographs taken in Charlottenburg and Kantstrasse in particular. So if I tried to do a tour of that area without the photographs, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. I could still do it. I could tell the history and show the damage, but you need the photographs to spark people's imagination, and show them what it looked like at the time.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe photographs will turn up at some stage, because they do. I mean, they do, and in dusty attics and
Yeah.
archives, and these things come to light all the time. But Soviet photographs, or maybe not so much nowadays with the situation in
Maybe.
Russia.
Although you say that, actually, last week I went and saw a photo exhibit in Orderland, which is quite close to Zelo, to where the Battle of the Zelo Heights was, and it was a Soviet photographer. He's called Valery Faminsky. Yeah, Valery.
I know him well. Well,
You
I
know him
don't.
well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of his, let's say, unapproved photos were shown in this exhibition. So it might have shown, injured Red Army soldiers, or Red Army soldiers who've got like two watches on their arms. All the photos of Red Army soldiers that that the authorities would not have approved of. So a lot of these photos were taken by this photographer, Valery Faminsky, and a lot of those photos were on show at this photo exhibition. And I agree with you that you need those like true photos, so not just the propaganda photos that were
Yeah,
like the red flag, hanging off of the Reichstag building. You really need the actual true to life photos that show the Battle of Berlin or the battle around Berlin in all of its, warts and glory. It's not, the unsanitized photos are really what you want to kind of
sure.
to show that story.
Absolutely. Faminsky's photos came to light purely by chance. Somebody found them in Moscow and put them on the Russian equivalent of eBay
Right.
about 7 or 8 years ago, and somebody spotted them and realized how important those photographs were and bought
Yes.
the whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
that's how they came to light.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My point is, and I guess your point as well, is that, where there were a heavy concentration of Soviet photographers is good and bad because the photos that then might come out are the sanitized photos, but still any photos are better than nothing because you need them to show the people, right, this is the before and then this is the now. But during the battle, this is what the area looked like. Yeah, it just very, very important part of the whole storytelling process. Absolutely key. Are there any other cities in Germany or in Europe where you've come across very interesting Second World War battle damage things or
yeah. I mean, there's very few towns and cities in Europe escaped unscathed from World War II. I'd love to run a tour around the villages of the Oderbruch, but the logistics of it just wouldn't work for me at the minute because I'd need a some sort of minibus, to take people around there. But yeah, a lot of those villages are fascinating. I haven't been extensively out there. There's one little town called Rathstock,
Mhm.
which covered in battle damaged buildings, and Reichwein itself.
Yes. Yes, right
There's
behind us, especially. I was at the church, in White.
Yeah,
It's beautiful, but also staggering. It's what's there.
yeah. Last time I was there, I think, what was that? 2022, I think, and they were doing some refurbishment to the church. I think just to keep it from falling down more than anything else. I don't think they were covering any battle damage or anything like that. I think they were just sort of strengthening the structural integrity of the place. But yeah, a lot of those towns out there, there's a lot of evidence. In Europe, yeah, yeah, yeah. I was in Rouen, if in Normandy a few years ago, and big building in the center of Rouen, the Palace of Justice, and it is completely plastered in not battle damage but bomb damage from U.S. Army Air Force raids in
Right.
1944, and there's more damage to that building than anything I've seen in Berlin. It's quite incredible to see. Uh, Also in Hamburg, again, bomb damage.
Yes.
As a, yeah, Hamburg surrendered without a fire being or a shot being fired, as far as I know. But there's a lot of bomb damage. But I'd like to travel more east, more in Eastern Europe. I haven't been in Eastern Europe a lot because um, there's so much history there,
Mm.
um, in regards to World War II that I'd love to explore more. But yeah, it all needs is time,
It all needs its time.
time and
That
money. Yeah.
absolutely. That might be, so talking of future plans, that's a great way to segue into my final question. So what are your future plans for the Berlin Battle Damage Facebook page? You've mentioned tours. Do you have upcoming tours which you will be running then this year as part of the 80th anniversary commemorations? Or do you have other tours maybe in your back pocket that you would like to run one day as well?
I have four tours in the first week of May to coincide with obviously the end of World War II in Europe and the German surrender. and also I hope to do some in June and July. And see, my problem is I don't live in Berlin full time. I'm back and forwards to plan way ahead. I can only maybe plan 6 weeks ahead at any point.
Right.
Um, so yes, mid-June and probably mid-July I'll be doing more tours. I'm going holiday at the end of July for a couple of
Right.
weeks to France, to find battle damage in France. But that'll be it.
Not
That's
that
another.
you're obsessed,
No,
oh, no, no, no.
no, nothing like that. Um, I have a German Kriegsmarine paybook, or as a sold book, as it's called in German,
Right.
to research when I'm in Berlin at some stage soon. This guy was a Kriegsmarine Feldwebel
Right.
who didn't survive the battle, and I have his sold book in my possession, and I want to find where he was buried, and
Right.
I know he lived in Berlin, and there's a lot of information in the Soul book about what happened to him during the Battle of Berlin. There's a fascinating entry in the Soul book, which it's a page that has been added to the Soul book to say that this guy has been entrusted to carry secret papers.
Incredible.
If he's stopped by a patrol, he's not to be forced into any ad hoc combat units,
Oh, wow.
and he's also to be given priority in the event of an air raid. Uh, he's to be given priority for a place in an aerial shelter.
Incredible.
So there's a story behind that soul book. I've had it for a while. I just haven't had time to research it, but I want to do that soon. And
Incredible.
also have a website on the go as well, which is it should be ready to launch soon. I mean it's there. It's the website. I have the bare bones of it. I just haven't added a lot of stuff into it. I'm not very techy, so it takes me a long time to do that type of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to launch the website soon because Facebook. I'm also on Twitter and Blue Sky as well, by the way. But those mediums sort of are quite restrictive in some ways
Mm.
to what you want to do. Especially Facebook, you got to abide by the rules, let's
You
say.
need to be very careful with what photos you post there.
Absolutely, and what you say. Yeah, I've had a few falling outs with Facebook over the years. They banned me for a month. Uh,
No.
I think I mentioned Hitler and Goebbels in one sentence, and
Well,
they banned me.
that,
They
I
banned
mean,
me for a month for that.
they
Um,
are they are quite central to the whole story. I mean,
it's hard to talk about the World War II without mentioning them.
yeah,
So yeah, Facebook's quite restrictive. Although I mean, it also is a great way to interact with people and get it. It's show the photographs and get the information across and also advertise the tours. I mean, it's a great tool, but I want a website that I can control myself, and also make it easier for people to book slots on the tours.
fantastic.
Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, so that's the plans for the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like you have a very, very busy summer ahead of you in terms of touring, and then of course the website launching as well.
I have 4 tours. We've got 3rd of May, 4th of May, 8th of May, and 10th of May, and then the next ones will be in June.
Fantastic. So right now, if people want to learn more about your tours, if they want to see some of the photos that you have posted, then how can they find your work? They should come to your Facebook page primarily to find all of those informations.
Yeah, Berlin Battle Damage Facebook page, and again the same title on Twitter or X as it's called now, and also on Blue Sky. Um, those are the ways how you can interact at the minute, and hopefully that'll change within the next 2 or 3 months when I get the website up and running, and there'll be a lot more information and photos and all sorts of things on there. Once I managed, once I managed to navigate the tech of actually getting.
Us historians are not the most tech friendly people. I guess we spend too much of our time with our noses in old dusty books and archives. But no, that sounds fantastic, Peter. I think that would be enough from me today. Just to say thank you very, very much for our chat. We weaved in and around some topics and took some, diversions, but that's all good. As you know, the Second World War is a big, large, and complex topic. Even when you're only talking about battle damage within one city, you can still go on very interesting tangents, and that's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much for your time, Peter.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.